Kia ora, welcome. So here today with myself is Bill Murphy from Purpose Capital. Welcome, Bill. How are you?
Yes, good, thank you. Really pleased to be here.
Excellent. Where are you joining us from this morning?
I'm in Tauranga this morning, and it's about to start pouring. Yeah, so
Yeah, I'm down in Tahuna, Queenstown, and it's raining here too. So that's just how it is at the moment. Well, thank you for making the time to join us today. So we're going to be having a bit of a kōrero, a brief kōrero on what we might call climate capital. You might call it something different. You can help to
yeah,
educate us. To set the scene, from my point of view, there's been a growing appetite to invest in climate solutions. People often say they don't know where to start. And I guess there's a spectrum from, small individuals, even through to large institutions. Um, could you perhaps just tell us what you think climate solutions look like from your point of view, and a little bit about how that aligns with Purpose Capital and the work that you do?
sure. Well, you could say that we've waited long enough to address the climate change crisis that the economics of the solution has caught up. So renewable energy generation now is much cheaper than fossil fuel generation. So that's really positive. Because people are obviously concerned about the cost of lowering emissions and the cost of an energy transition. And given now that those costs are more than competitive with the existing generation costs, that's great. So we have that going. We have that wind in our sails. We could use more help from government. Definitely, this government in particular looks backwards, doesn't even look sideways, and so the emissions trading scheme, the price of carbon credits, and some of the solutions that the government is putting, particularly in the area of generation, are very much looking backwards. So, for instance, the importation of liquid natural gas, LNG, and the increasing of coal stores at Huntley are really backward-looking solutions. So there's tremendous opportunities for renewable generation, efficiency, and in particular distributed electricity, which has not only the benefits of resiliency and reduced cost for consumers and businesses, it also has an important way of making sure that the energy transition is a just transition, that it takes into account the cost of things like electricity for people.
Thank you. Yeah, and we've had some discussions with EECA, ICA, and also with Rewiring Aotearoa, so people can find those on our website if they want that kind of educational piece around the energy transition. There is a lot of jargon in this space that's quite hard for, I think, just for everyday people to get their heads around. So I'm going to put forward maybe what climate positive capital is into three buckets, and you can maybe correct me, or we can just talk about that. So the three buckets that I'm kind of thinking of are avoided emissions, which might be things like solar, wind, EV charging. We might look at reduced emissions, which might be more around things like energy efficiency in the way we build, for example. Or we might look at removed emissions, entirely removed through things like restoration programs like nature-based solutions such as wetlands or native forestry, which is something that we also fund as well. When we speak of like climate positive capital, which of those spaces does Purpose Capital kind of work with, or could you outline what some of those might look like?
Sure. We just look at your email, so I have that.
Yeah, sorry.
Avoided emissions, reduced emissions, and removed or stored. Purpose Capital is an impact fund, and we take the impact side of that very seriously. We won't invest in anything unless it meets the impact hurdle. However, we are also obliged to return to our investors full market rate returns. So there's certain areas that we can go into and certain areas that we can only go into partially and certain areas that we can't go into it at all. And so avoided emissions is an area that we certainly are involved in and have invested in and will, and also reduced emissions are removed, restored, nature-based solutions, wetlands, native forestry. The problem is, where's the business model and the financial return for an impact fund to invest in wetland restoration? There is none. And when you think of the capitalist economic model that we have, and that we all rely entirely upon nature, and the fact that this capitalist system doesn't work to support nature, there's a hint straight away that we are way off base in terms of our economic system. So, however, that is the system that we have to work within. So renewable energy generation is an area both utility scale, meaning big, and distributed, meaning localized, is an area that we do invest in. And also energy efficiency is an area we invest in.
And can you name or give us an example of one of those, just so that viewers can kind of actually understand what that looks like?
Sure. So we'll start off with utility scale, which is probably the least useful for the audience. These are very, very big, typically solar, but there can be certainly wind as well. Those projects either sell their electricity directly into the grid, the New Zealand backbone of electricity distribution in New Zealand, or sometimes, interestingly, 100% of the electricity generated there goes to a particular user. For instance, Ryman Healthcare, the last solar farm that we invested in, where the warehouse is also a purchaser of 100% renewable energy for their facilities. So that's utility scale. Distributed is where we're really interested, and that is solar on rooftops. Everyone will be familiar with solar on rooftops for residential, but solar on rooftops for commercial, industrial, and in particular for this audience, thinking about solar on rooftops for community buildings, sporting buildings, sports facilities, council buildings, all those things. Not only have the benefits of enabling those facilities to use renewable energy, they also have the benefit of enabling those facilities, those clubs, council, community groups, social housing, to over-generate electricity so that they can really lower their electricity cost, which is key in those areas, because those
huge social benefit. Hey,
exactly. So distributed solar is extremely exciting. It will revolutionize the way electricity is part of our life. And if we do it right, it can actually really decrease the cost of electricity for us all, rather than increase it as some people fear it might.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to have a few, images that we can kind of picture to help us understand it all. And in terms of, I guess, investment pathways, there's a different kind of effort. So as a layperson, you have to excuse me, not being in the finance space, but it could be described as the amount of effort that your investment does, perhaps, whether it's just kind of screening out the bad, or whether it's, Paris aligned, whether it's a moderate effort, or whether it could be more catalytic. In terms of Aotearoa, I mean, where are we at, and what does some of those spaces look like? You've talked about some of the exciting spaces just previously. Is some of it catalytic? Like what do you see in your space?
Yes. So New Zealand on the world stage is highly regarded because 85.5% of our electricity generation is renewable.
Yep.
And that's remarkable. There's almost no other country, very few other countries in the world that come close to that. However, a caveat to that, only 45.5% of our overall energy is renewable. And that's
Yeah.
because almost 100% of our transport emissions are fossil fuel, diesel and petrol. So the conversion of that fleet to electric is very important. So keep in mind the 85.5%, hey, aren't we great? But 45.5%, ooh, not so great. Um, so in terms of us being catalytic, we could give the whole world a lot of hope if we could drive that 85.5% to, let's say, 100% renewable.
Mm.
And the way in which we can do that is by, as rapidly as possible, increasing renewable energy generation, and then using the hydro lakes as our firming, and pardon the term firming. All that means is backup. Uh, Solar power and wind power is intermittent, right? As I just said, looking out the window, oops, it's raining. That's good for the hydro lakes, except I'm in the North Island, but not so good for wind and for solar in particular. And it's very calm today, so wind. So if we are 100% reliant upon renewable energy, we would have situations where the lights would be going out in our houses because of that. So the way the current system works is coal at Huntley Power Station and gas, natural gas, is used as firming. We can get rid of all of that, and some people on the call may dispute this, and that's fine. We could get rid of all of that and have the hydro lakes and geothermal increase to provide the firming that we need so that we don't have to use fossil fuels at all. That would be the most catalytic and morale boosting thing that we could do here in New Zealand for the rest of the world. Become 100% renewable as quickly as possible.
Yeah, wouldn't that be exciting?
Yeah.
We won't talk about the political situation at the moment. So thinking about the space that I work in, so our mahi is kind of led by a lot of the community trusts. So also we have lots of philanthropic funders. Um, how do you feel that philanthropic funders can play a meaningful role in this energy transition and supporting that capital flow to this investment space?
Don't worry about utility scale solar and wind generation. There's the big institutional investors and banks will support that. That will go. It makes financial sense. The
Yeah.
risks are known, and so that'll be supported. So philanthropic and other money doesn't have to worry about that space. Um, I would also say residential energy efficiency and generation. The banks will support that strongly because they simply can tack on the costs involved in that onto someone's mortgage. That doesn't apply for those that don't have mortgages and are possibly renting. That's another issue, and possibly there's a place for philanthropic there. The real hard part is the bit in the middle. And the bit in the middle is commercial, industrial, and community-based distributed energy, all of which I think are real areas of interest for listeners. That's where Purpose Capital is focusing because we know we can have the most catalytic effect there. So how can we participate there? What does that finance look like in that place? Councils, philanthropics can play really meaningful roles by helping to underwrite projects. There are projects that a financier like Purpose Capital that will look at, and we will not be able to go forward with because of the risks involved in it. So, for instance, providing an electrification solution to an industry in a particular regional town that may cause air pollution, may cause other issues, and and the community would like to see that become electrified rather than using coal, oil for its heat and processing. The risk for a financier, a private financier, is what happens if that business goes under. We put in $2-3 million worth of kit. What happens? So underwriting can be a really, really helpful approach that listeners could use to help. Subsidizing renewable energy development, particularly in, let's say, social housing, community housing. Tools that we use are leasing. So the biggest cost or the biggest impediment to someone going on this journey is the upfront cost of the conversion. Within a couple of years, they will realize that they are saving a lot of money through having electrified their process. But it's that upfront capital cost that's the real challenge. So ways in which we could come together, public, private, philanthropic, to provide, take some of the sting out of that upfront capital cost. So that's leasing, which is something that we do. That's asset as a service, where they never even own the actual asset. They are actually renting it from us. And with the energy costs, the energy savings that they get, it's a very attractive way of getting them on this journey. So ways in which the listeners could support those types of initiatives would be really helpful.
Okay,
Finally, blended finance. So grant funding, low interest, alongside a private funder, be it the bank or someone like ourselves or whoever.
Yeah, there's huge opportunity for the blended finance model, isn't there? And I think that's a really emerging space right now as well, with as you discussed, the kind of tipping point that we've reached where it just makes economic sense now. So it's the risk has been kind of removed, been proven to be de-risked, I guess.
That's right.
One other thing that I think is just interesting for us to perhaps close on is, how we measure impact and how we truly assess whether something is climate positive. So I know that obviously in your space you have to do a lot of work around what that impact looks like. Can you just speak to maybe taking that burden off others, or again how philanthropic funders may wish to support something but want to be able to speak to their trustees and their communities about the impact and how it's measured?
Yeah, it's very interesting that you bring that point up, because we're currently raising capital for our second fund. So we're out pitching our fund, and we've been pitching recently, presenting to some of the community trusts. And we have to work harder than we did in the past to make sure they understand that we are an impact fund. And the reason that we're investing in the energy transition is for impact reasons, not just because it's the flavor of the day. So first off, and most obviously, it's decarbonization. It's lowering emissions. The most important issue facing us, though there's all kinds of forces wanting to stick it back under the covers, is the climate crisis. So lowering emissions is the first most important impact that we can have. Being catalytic in this transition. So that's a way in which we can drive systemic change. So through leadership, through stepping into areas where the banks, institutional investors, the rest of the market is not quite ready yet, stepping into that area and getting that going, developing case studies, and turning to the larger market and saying, you should be investing in here, in this area, and this is how you do it, is also a very important part of the impact story. The just transition that I mentioned, always keeping an eye on that, not just on the emissions issue, carbon, but also on how we can shape this transition so that it works for human beings as well as for the climate, is a proof point that we require with all of our investments. So those are a few thoughts on ensuring that we're doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess just to build on that as well, to state that in the context that I work in, with the funders' commitment on climate action, we one of the commitments is absolutely around upholding te tiriti, and we know that climate justice is social justice. So for any of our signatories, of which we have many, they are completely on board with that. So I think it's just important to speak to the Aotearoa kind of uniqueness as well, and to ensure that when we're working with communities, that it is around upholding that kind of tika or just space.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
glad that you mentioned that. Okay, well look, we've had quite a good chat there. It's surface level. I know we could go much deeper. Maybe it's an opportunity for people to contact you should they wish to. Is there anything else that you wanted to say in closing that that we haven't perhaps covered? That any burning thoughts before we sign off?
As listeners consider going into this area, as always, trusted, experienced counterparties are really, really important, be they co-financiers or the people who actually physically install and supply the equipment. It's really important that you ensure that you're working with parties that you trust and that have got a lot of good experience. That does sometimes mean moving out of your region, and don't be afraid to do that. In time, there will be plenty within your region who could provide this, but in the meantime, go with the best parties that you can. No, I think that's basically it. I think, like in all these things, if you recognize that this is an issue for your area of concern, your area of yeah, then start. It's
Yeah.
possible. Start, act, do it, inquire, and yeah, we can all participate. And maybe the last thing to say is it's so important. If the bigger part of the market is not willing to go into some of the things that we're talking about here, sometimes there's good reasons for that. In other words, the risks are too high. But oftentimes there isn't good reasons. They're just stuck in their ways. So systemic change, there's the real opportunity here to show how we can do it, case studies, and yeah, drive this change.
Well, thank you. And perhaps as part of this webinar, we could share a case study to a link as well, if that's an opportunity for us. So thank you very much for your time today, Bill. Appreciate your expertise in your area, and I'll provide the links for people to contact you.
Great. Thanks, Esther. Thank you all.
Thank you. Kia ora.